You are in a room filled with individuals who believe they are in control, yet they do not notice you. This is not due to any attempt at concealment or speaking softly, but rather because you understand a fundamental principle about power. It does not always make itself known. At times, it enters subtly, through the gaps in routine, during the moments of silence between choices, and in the unguarded times when others are preoccupied with maintaining their image, thus failing to recognize who is actually making significant changes. This is not about upheaval, speeches, or dramatic betrayals. It is about quiet acquisitions that are so seamless that, by the time anyone becomes aware of what has taken place, you are no longer perceived as a threat, but as a solution. This concept was not only suggested by Machiavelli, he outlined it clearly. It is not found in the loud sections that are frequently quoted, but in the margins and pauses of his warnings, where he allows readers to draw their own conclusions, knowing that those who can read between the lines are capable of taking action without seeking approval. Consider this. When was the last time you observed someone rise without drawing attention to themselves? Not someone who captivates a crowd with charisma, but rather someone who quietly becomes seated at the head of the table, with no one recalling when that shift occurred. This phenomenon is not due to chance or coincidence. It is the result of silent acquisition. It is not exclusive to leaders, executives, or revolutionaries. It is accessible to anyone who grasps that power is not seized, but absorbed, much like water into soil, slow, quiet, and unavoidable. You do not require an official title to start behaving as if you own the space. What you need is presence, not the loud kind, but the magnetic kind that naturally generates room by merely existing. Many view power as something akin to a crown, a visible item that must be given to them. Machiavelli had a different perspective. He viewed it as an unseen force, continuously shaping everything it encounters without ever disturbing the surface. One does not seize this force. Rather, one learns to navigate it. Furthermore, one learns to guide it, with the crucial aspect being that no one is aware of this guidance until the course has already shifted. This represents the skill involved. This is the principle. Quiet influence is not about imposition, but about presence, being consistently present where decisions occur. The goal is not to contest or to impress, but to integrate into the ongoing process. The individual who consistently appears when challenges arise and provides solutions without seeking acknowledgement becomes the one in possession of the keys, not through demand, but because others may have overlooked their location. The uncomfortable reality is that many individuals fear entering this space, not due to a lack of ambition, but because they have been conditioned to seek approval, to wait for acknowledgement, a title, or an invitation. However, Machiavelli rejected the notion of waiting. He championed the idea of positioning. One does not request trust. Instead, one crafts circumstances that render trust the sole reasonable choice. Influence is not sought. Dependencies are subtly woven in a manner so natural that one's absence would be akin to removing a foundational support. This is accomplished quietly, without announcements or grand declarations, as proclaiming one's ambitions makes one vulnerable, while remaining low-key turns one into a stable presence. To illustrate this in a practical context, rather than through well-worn historical examples, consider a scenario in an office setting, regardless of the industry, where a project is struggling. Discussions abound, meetings occur, and blame shifts among individuals. Then, an individual who is neither the boss nor the most vocal enters and states, "I'll take care of the client's concerns." This person then works behind the scenes for 2 days, returns with updated timelines, revised responsibilities, and a calm confidence that everything is under control, all without any fanfare or self-promotion. When the next issue arises, the team instinctively turns to this individual, not the one holding the title, but the one who previously resolved the last crisis. This exemplifies quiet influence. Leadership was not solicited. It became inherently necessary by addressing what others avoided, all while keeping the focus off oneself. Many falter in this understanding, equating acquisition with visibility, believing that they must be seen and heard. Yet, Machiavelli recognized that greater volume often invites resistance, while maintaining a quiet presence allows one to occupy more space. Silence, in this context, is not an absence. It is a strategic approach that focuses on the area where assumptions are formed and reputations are established without direct involvement. When one does not promote their contributions, others may begin to recognize and advocate for them, which can be more impactful. A reputation built by others serves as protection, while a self-constructed reputation may become a target. Importantly, this approach is not about manipulation in a negative way. It involves a deep understanding of human nature that allows one to position themselves where they are needed before the need is recognized by others. This requires observing the environment not out of ego, but to identify opportunities, such as friction, gaps, or unspoken tensions. These aspects become openings not for exploitation, but for resolution, allowing one to become part of the solution. Solutions tend to be relied upon rather than replaced. It may sound passive, but it is an active process, albeit subtly so. It involves choosing moments with precision, knowing when to speak and when to remain silent. Building alliances occurs through reliability rather than flattery, leading to a reputation where others acknowledge one as the obvious answer to their needs. Power is not seized forcibly. Instead, it gravitates toward those who become a stable presence in an unpredictable environment. This method is applicable in various contexts, whether in boardrooms, social circles, creative collaborations, families, or online communities. Power is influenced by behavior rather than location. Individuals who consistently demonstrate clarity, calmness, and competence without seeking applause often find themselves in leadership roles as others willingly follow their guidance. To initiate this process, start by refraining from seeking permission or waiting for approval. Instead, identify the silent gaps in your surroundings, including tasks that need attention, tensions that require resolution, and unanswered questions, and address them quietly and consistently without drawing attention. Allow actions to speak louder than words, and observe patiently as your environment starts to shift around you without force. If this approach seems theoretical or merely clever phrasing, keep in mind that this is just the beginning. The underlying mechanisms, psychological triggers, timing, and the ability to influence perception without overt action are where the complexities lie. Mastering the subtleties of this skill is essential before advancing further. Therefore, take the time to breathe, observe, and position yourself, and when the moment arises, you will present yourself seamlessly. They will understand that you are in charge. You may think you have observed the dynamics of power, but true power often goes unnoticed. What many perceive as power is often just noise presented as authority. The shouting, the titles, the exaggerated confidence do not equate to control. They are merely a performance. Genuine power does not announce itself. It is already established before discussions begin. It influences agendas before meetings take place, and the individual in possession of that power is not necessarily the loudest voice in the room. Instead, they are the person whom others consult once the noise subsides. This process involves subtle acquisition of influence, an integration that is so profound that reversing it would be detrimental. Historical figures have hinted at these truths, tucked between cautions and hypotheticals, because those who recognize these insights are capable of wielding them effectively. Strategic thinkers often overlook a critical fact. People do not resist what they do not perceive as a threat. Therefore, it is advisable to avoid being a threat. Instead, be a source of reassurance. Act as the stabilizing force amid chaos, guiding without overt control. This approach allows for influence without direct assertion and fosters appreciation among peers while quietly redefining the operational parameters. To illustrate this practically, consider a situation where you are among colleagues, friends, or collaborators facing conflict over a decision. With everyone debating and reaching an impasse, many will eagerly share their opinions in an effort to sway the group. Instead of participating in this manner, remain silent until the tension peaks. When fatigue sets in, present not a definitive solution, but a framework for moving forward. You might suggest breaking the issue into manageable phases or identifying shared agreement on a single point. By not positioning yourself as the answer, but rather as the structure for the discussion, you transform your role from leader to enabler. This form of enabling leadership is powerful because it is appreciated rather than resented. While others feel acknowledged, you are quietly establishing the limits of what can be achieved. This method is about strategic facilitation, not manipulation. To effectively navigate this dynamic, you do not need to be the most knowledgeable person present. Rather, you should focus on being keenly observant. Pay attention to how decisions are actually made, who yields to whom, who speaks without interruption, and who has the final word. These observations will serve as your guide. The concept of silent acquisition involves understanding the nuanced dynamics of the environment and redirecting the flow of influence. Rather than confronting existing hierarchies, you can become integral to their operation, serving as the individual who knows where resources are located, remembers important timelines, and foresees potential errors. Such individuals do not require formal recognition to have a significant impact. They are already functioning as key players. Those in higher positions often support them vigorously, not from loyalty, but from a desire for self-preservation. Many people tend to concentrate on overarching goals, vision, branding, and significant launches. However, important details such as version control and feedback tracking often go unnoticed. In such situations, you might decide to take initiative without drawing attention to yourself. You would create a shared folder and send reminders, effectively acting as a unifying force within the team. After a few weeks, when a client requests revision history and others are caught off guard, you'll have everything organized and readily available. In that moment, your role transcends that of a junior designer or intern. You become a vital component of the team's operations. As new projects commence, leadership and workflow management may fall to you rather than the most vocal team member due to your previous contributions in maintaining order. This process of quietly establishing your value is what can be termed as silent acquisition. You haven't campaigned or negotiated for recognition. Instead, you've made yourself an essential part of the organization. This approach is scalable, effective whether you are part of a small startup or a long-established institution. You don't have to be the charismatic founder to influence culture. What matters is modeling behavior that others tend to replicate unconsciously. Influence is not about loudness, it is about consistency. It involves showing up regularly and addressing issues that others often overlook until your approach becomes the norm. Norms are seldom challenged. They tend to be accepted and followed. Timing is also crucial. Change doesn't happen gradually forever. At some point, you'll instinctively know when the foundation you've established is strong enough to support more weight. That's the moment when you transition from fixer to architect. You do not need to announce this shift. It should be demonstrated through your actions. Make a small, visible decision that involves minimal risk. Approach it not merely as a task, but as a setting of precedent. Rather than seeking input, present the course of action as if it has already been established. Communicate what steps will be taken rather than asking what others think should happen. This is subtle, yet powerful. Language shapes perceptions, and when you speak from a place of assumed authority, others will likely follow suit. This is not arrogance. It is a matter of asserting the position you've earned. Power materializes not through titles or speeches, but through an unspoken understanding that processes are more effective with your involvement. The objective is not to seize power, but to become indispensable. You achieve this quietly and gracefully, making it evident that without your input, functionality is compromised. Awareness of this shift may come only when others attempt to reclaim control and find it elusive. However, it is important to remain vigilant. Complacency breeds vulnerability. This subtle accumulation of influence is not a destination, but a process that requires continual adjustment, observation, and restraint. If you begin to believe in your own narrative, you risk becoming mere background noise, which tends to be overlooked. Instead, remain adaptable and understated, thriving in the space that exists between perception and reality. If you think you fully understand this process, you might not. The next stage involves dismantling the illusion of control and using absence as a strategic tool, creating a dynamic where your absence becomes notable. Mastering the ability to be influential without seeking attention is vital. Continue observing, positioning yourself, and addressing what others will not. When significant shifts occur, you will be the one maintaining stability, quietly and dependably. Your presence will have become so integral that your departure will be felt profoundly. This is the essence of effective influence. Not being the most visible, but rather creating a background presence that, when absent, is sorely missed. Machiavelli recognized an important truth. The most lasting power is not always overtly visible. Instead, it operates quietly and continuously, often going unnoticed until its absence threatens the entire system. This form of power is not something that can be proclaimed. It must be cultivated deliberately and strategically. It is not about being congenial or waiting for opportunities. It is about maintaining a low profile while allowing others to believe they are in control, all while you manage the underlying mechanics. You do not need a prominent position. Rather, your goal is to be the stabilizing force that prevents the structure from collapsing. Mastering this subtlety leads to a position of resilience, as it becomes challenging for others to confront someone who appears absent or to replace someone who never established themselves as indispensable. To implement this approach, begin with small tasks. Select responsibilities that others may overlook, not because they are beneath you, but because they lack visibility. These may include scheduling, follow-ups, or necessary documentation, essential but often unappreciated tasks. Undertake these responsibilities with attention and reliability so that, Over time, they become associated with your presence. It is essential, however, to gradually dissociate your identity from these tasks. Instead of saying, "I handled that," shift to, "It's taken care of." This detachment leads others to view the task as a given, rather than something dependent on you. Once the task becomes routine, and you are the one who established that routine, you integrate yourself into the framework so seamlessly that your absence goes unchallenged. Next, begin to reduce your visibility incrementally without making a noticeable shift. Allow timescales to stretch slightly, or withhold intervention in minor mishaps, letting a deadline slip by or a communication go unanswered just long enough for it to be recognized. In that moment of uncertainty, others will start to grasp the extent of your contributions, feeling the pressure of your absence. They will not feel resentment toward your withdrawal. Rather, they may feel anxious and seek you out, expressing regret and asking for your reintegration. This response stems not from any coercive tactic, but from a legitimate recognition of the value you provide. This approach is about guiding perceptions, not manipulating them. You are instructing them on what occurs when the silent engine ceases to operate. This is where many hesitate, believing that stepping back is a gamble and might make them appear untrustworthy. However, true strength is not demonstrated through constant presence, but rather through absence. Anyone can be helpful when they are in sight. The real challenge lies in making others feel disoriented when you are not around. That is the critical point. Once you cross it, you transform from being just an employee, colleague, or friend into an integral part of the system. Such a foundation does not negotiate or campaign. It simply exists, prompting the world to adjust to it. Consider a scenario where you are always the one organizing team outings, not due to a passion for planning events, but because no one else is willing to do so. You manage the invitations, venues, dietary needs, and agendas without drawing attention to yourself. One month, you inform your team that you are too busy and ask someone else to take over. They struggle, double booking dates and overlooking dietary requirements, leading to a chaotic event. Afterward, everyone feels relieved when you offer to organize the next outing, not out of obligation, but because they recognize the cost of proceeding without you. The objective is not to seek praise, but to become an assumed part of the process. This principle is scalable across various aspects: budgets, client engagement, crisis management, creative guidance, culture, and trust. The approach remains the same: integrate, enable, step back just enough to reveal vulnerabilities, and then reinsert yourself, not as a savior, but as an expected presence. What you seek is for others to acknowledge, "Oh good, you're managing it." That acknowledgement signifies surrender and acceptance of your influence, which is gained without a word ever needing to be spoken. There's no need for reminders or documentation of your contributions, nor for keeping track, as the system itself reflects your value. The smoother operations run with your involvement, the more noticeable it becomes when you are absent. The louder that absence resonates, the more inclined they will be to keep you within their sphere, motivated not by loyalty, but by self-interest. This is a form of loyalty that has longevity. However, caution is necessary. Those who fail do so by becoming greedy, trying to assert their leverage the moment they recognize their position. This visibility can make them a target. Silent acquisition is effective only if you remain seamless in your contribution. Once you weaponize your importance, the delicate balance is disrupted, and you may become the challenge rather than the solution. Therefore, maintaining composure, discretion, and a generous spirit, even when holding all the advantages, becomes essential. Generosity rooted in strength indicates dominance. This type of influence exists inherently without the need for enforcement. Machiavelli conveyed these ideas through subtlety, in glances and pauses rather than explicit instructions, allowing for connections to be made. If one is perceptive enough to recognize these nuances, they are also capable of leveraging them. Understanding that power is about consistency, showing up to address needs no one else will tackle, and then retreating just enough to allow others to recognize the absence is key, not as a punishment, but as a gentle reminder of the advantages of your presence. This is not the conclusion, but rather a rhythm that underpins all endeavors. True power is not forcibly taken. It is absorbed and intricately interwoven into the fabric of your environment.